Well, aren't you lucky? This is the Upload VR Gamescast coming to you Friday. That's right. We didn't skip a week, we got one in. I'm Jamie Feldham. I'm your host for Upload VR's weekly gaming podcast. And joining me live today is not Harry Baker, but the one, the only Ian Hamilton.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me and letting me talk games with you. Or I don't know how much I'm going to talk games. I'm going to talk about that concert. That was an interesting experience.
Yeah. Ian, me and you have never met as these virtual avatars before, as the meta avatars. You look very Beano. I don't know if that means anything to you. Dennis the Menace.
Dennis the Menace. I could see
Like
that. Yeah.
UK
I have
Dennis
this
the Menace.
weird ridge on the front of my head that I don't like. It's the front of my head is larger than the back of my head, and I don't like that.
You do know you can change that, right?
I don't like the avatar interface. I can't figure out how to get what I want out of that interface.
It's just I've met you in real life, and the freckles. Forgive me for saying this, but you don't have them in real life, do you?
Yeah, well, last time you saw me was 3 years ago, and I've done a lot of aging since then. Yeah,
I've done some freckling. Before we move on to all our various topics and welcome our members and say hello to everyone in the chat, I'd like to tell you that this podcast was sponsored by Les Mills Body Combat. Les Mills Body Combat has 30 workouts designed to get the best results from beginners to advanced users. The game brings body combat experience to your VR headset, and you can get it on the Oculus Store for Quest today by clicking the link in the description below. It's definitely there. You might have to press see more, but I definitely put it in there. And let's say hello to everyone in the chat. We've got people here for the first time in a while because me and Harry have been doing the whole pre-recorded thing because he lives on the bottom of the world and no one knows how the time works down there, so we just pre-record it. But it's good to see Opta. It's good to see Luz VR Corner, Robert Canones, Anna Kays. Good to see you, David Kopp. D1360VR. Good to see you. Battle Something. Adam Hartzell, the absolute boy, and all y'all. Thank you so much for joining us live today. And of course, our members who are Elaine Grass, the Shermacker 30, Anthony Mann Wexford, Mars Dyer, Robert Canones, times 2, Handy Panama, wait for the change, Daniel Barwin, Jerome Houston, Andrew King, Skiva 007, Sexy Bicycle, Devin Miller, Matthew May, Rick Tett, 360 Pickable, Smash Reality, Adam Hartzell, the absolute boy, times 2, John Westra. There are a lot of people that join us that are members. Thank you all so much. How are you doing, Ian?
It's great to see those members. It's great to see the members growing week to week. And yeah, obviously, if any super chat questions, we try to get to those. I've had a bunch of those over on the Monday show.
I am not the best at live chat, but now that Zena's gone, I have to be better, and I'm trying to be better. We all are trying to be better. And maybe if I miss things, just point it out to me and we'll get to it. Should we get into a little news? It's been a busy week. Yeah, things have been happening. I'm going to start with just some news bits because I think we've got 3 topics that are going to form the basis of the show. No reviews today, but we've got some little news bits to kick us off. First things first, Vox Machinae, which might be a game that VR veterans remember, has announced it's coming to Quest 2 on March 3rd. With a single-player campaign that is also coming to the PC VR version of the game, which has been in early access for very, very long. We've got a new trailer for the game. Quite an ambitious-looking thing. This is a mech battler, usually, and it's got immersive cockpit controls. You use your hands to interact with the UI in different ways. And then the single-player campaign, it's traditionally a multiplayer game, is going to be adding story, building relationship with crewmates, as you can see in the trailer behind me. And it sounds pretty ambitious. Ian, did you ever play Vox Machinae back in the day? Because it's quite an old one, if you remember.
Last mech game I really got into was the Mech Warrior games back in the day, and it's been a long time since I loved them, but it feels like the mech games have done 20 years of evolution in their user interfaces, and there's just so much to do with your mech customization. And I don't know, in VR it feels like you really need to have a simple onboarding and then have a really deep customization experience to really get the best of both worlds. And I don't know. I haven't taken to any VR mech games yet. What's the sort of yeah? Do you think this is going
Well,
to be the mech game going forward?
I think the big two right now are this and Iron Rebellion, which has had a lot of success on App Lab and early access, and they're definitely going to be competing. I don't know if I've found anything yet. I need to jump back into Vox Machinae and reacquaint myself with a lot of its controls because I don't know if I've tried anything yet that really does get that proper immersive, spacey, fully in control feel, as opposed to just using a gamepad where I feel like at least I get the response I'm looking for out of the system. Because I don't know if you remember back in the day of the Oculus Kickstarter campaign, there was talk of that Hawken game. That was one of the first
Mm-hmm.
potential actual Rift games, and then that kind of never materialized. I don't think, and I think
What was the
Hawken's kind of
PlayStation VR one that was the Battler Riggs?
oh Riggs, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great
died
shout.
of very quick death in the competitive multiplayer scene.
Yeah, I think the studio lived on another like maybe 6 months after the game's release, and then they went, which was a real big shame because I think that game had a lot of potential and was gone too soon, frankly. But this, yeah, this looks good. The voice acting, if you've watched the trailer, the voice acting's kind of a little on the cheesy side, so we'll see how that plays out. But that's not too surprising, given it's very much an indie VR game. Let's move on to another little news bit. We've got another date for you. This time it's for Outlier, which is the third game from Joyway, who you will know for Stride and Against. I'm quite amazed that this trailer just started, and I swear I just put on the Vox Machina trailer again. I'm quite amazed that we're going into our third Joyway game. Like I said, this is going to be an early access thing on March 17th. So it's
Yeah, do they
a
finish their
roguelike.
games, Jamie?
Stride is still in early access. Against is still in early access. There is a lot of great content and polish in Against already. They said they're just they put it in early access so they can take user feedback and polish the experience. Stride has you remember it came out on Quest like summer last year, and I reviewed it saying I think what's here as a game is really fun, but there's not anywhere near enough content in it yet to justify a purchase. And they're still working on the multiplayer. So I don't.
Mm.
These guys are really interesting. They are working on lots of games, very high concept games, very polished looking games. And I would love to know. I think they're based in Moscow. Who knows how to say it? And I would love to know what kind of size they are, what the designation between teams is, because like from what I've seen, like no one's pressed the pause button on Stride or Against because of this game. So they have to be quite a big studio, I imagine, which is strange, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things that always is an issue in VR development. Is you kind of every single developer can kind of uh, differ in how much they share about their internal structure and how they actually
Mm.
have that many people working on a particular project. And yeah, I don't actually know the structure of this particular team, but it does seem like they put out quite a lot of content, and there's a lot of fans of
Mm.
those very different titles. So uh, I just I want to make sure people sort of get a finished product at the end of the day. And we can really evaluate some of these things once they get properly completed.
Yeah, and it's one of the hard things of I wouldn't have done a review for Stride, like a scored review or a labeled review by now, if it hadn't come out, if it had been able to come out on Quest as early access, right? But the thing we always say in our like reviews guidelines is that if a game comes out on Steam and it's in early access, but then it comes to Quest, because there's no way of like literally telling the audience this game isn't finished yet, we kind of don't give it that kind of benefit of the doubt early access kind of review. We give it the full thing with with the caveat that if it ends up getting a bunch of extra content, we'll go back and reevaluate. But I don't think we've really seen that happen for any of those games yet on a massive scale.
I'm seeing people in the comments still sort of talking about mech games, and I thought I'd ask you, Jamie, since you're the expert here. Are there any mech games that let you physically like have a model of your mech in here and take pieces from a table and slot them onto the
Like
mech?
modify it like that. I don't think so. I think the rigs customization was just three different classes you choose between. Um, I feel like the closest thing to that kind of idea is actually you remember Stormlands had that thing where you updated your own body by taking like a new arm and putting it on the
Mm,
side, like ripping off your old arm and putting a new one on, which was really really cool. But there's definitely like you were singing Iron Man for mic test a second ago. There's definitely like scope for that kind of interface, right? To like really
yep.
piece together in live action. I mean, there is just huge potential for that kind of cockpit based experience. Like, Ultra Wings was such an incredible experience a couple of weeks ago because it is that immersive cockpit control. It's just, I don't feel like I've seen a mech game yet that then gets the actual game design to a point where it's really, really compelling. And elements like that, I think, would really, really help it come along. Like, I
Yeah.
would love to see Sony revisit rigs and actually build like a fully single player campaign designed around all of that immersion rather than just that arena shooter kind of deal.
Yeah, Harry pointed out in his look at virtual reality too, that they've got that mech mechanic as a core
Yeah.
element there, and you're like operating your own body from inside, like a mech interface, like being John Malkovich, and
Mm.
it's such a great fit for comfort, and that's I'm seeing people in the comments are like, Riggs was one of their first purchases, and I remember one of my first that I remember one of my demos from PSVR back when they did that GDC demo, however many years ago. Riggs, I think, was there. And yeah, it's amazing that you can sort of throw yourself so quickly around that stadium and still 95% of people are going to feel comfortable, probably. And I don't know why it isn't a bigger genre than it is.
Mm. Yeah, I remember. I think it was E3 I first played rigs, and it was kind of just came out of the blue as well. Like it wasn't like one of the big things that Sony had debuted alongside like E Valkyrie and PlayStation VR World. It was kind of this thing that was just there, and it was such an interesting. There were so many great moments to it, like the first time you went up the lift and the doors opened to the arena. And it was such a cool realization of so many different elements of VR, of like the idea of virtual esports and yeah, mech combat and everything like that. It just it's there's so many of those games. I also think about what was it called? Space Blood. I think it was called Space Blood Arena, which was a 6 DoF flying game like Descent and things like that, which is again multiplayer game that suffered similar fate despite the potential for such immersion and power in that immersion. I think those games need to go single player to really prove themselves out first, rather than trying to start with these online communities, or at least have some sort of single player component to bring in other people that
Mm.
are more interested in that experience first. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, Vox Mac and I definitely we're going to be reviewing that one as a complete package, and I'm really looking forward to it. We've got one other news bit announcement or release date today, which is for I don't know if start tenders, although I want to say star tenders because that sounds better. Yeah, star tenders, not start tenders. Why would it be start tenders? Anyway, this is one of your kind of like cosmic cooking games. This time, as you can see in the trailer, you're a robot. You're talking to aliens. They are making certain orders, and you're making cocktails. Kind of, like we've seen this game in many different forms, but I think this is quite a quirky, fun take on the genre. It will be. I think the more of these cooking games that come out, the more appreciation I have for them because they're always centered around doing fun interactions in VR rather than just like another wave shooter or something. So yes, you're kind of like riffing off of Overcooked, right? And you're trying to get that kind of hecticness down, and it's that similar kind of experience, but there is actually something fun to pouring a cocktail, mixing drinks, and everything like that. So this is on Quest, PC VR, and PSVR on March 17th, which
Yeah,
is
I wonder
all
if
the
this is the type of game that Alchemy would have made if they
yeah.
didn't get purchased by Google. Like
Yep.
you go to Google and you want to make a multiplayer game, like what service are you going to use
Yeah.
to do that? And like, yeah, it's a natural evolution of the stuff that was happening in Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator, and then doing that with other people uh, in a multiplayer way ends up being super fun. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is becoming such a crowded genre. I'm curious to see what sort of ends up being in the top few.
Yeah, and you're right. Like the alchemy comparison is really apt because it is so that vibe and that world, and actually, color palette wise, doesn't look too far off of Cosmonius High in terms of the kind of like neon space, child friendly vibe. Um, yeah, looks good. That's news bits for the week because we have some more news, but they're not bits. We're gonna extrapolate and talk in depth about 3 other topics today. And I'm glad you're here, Ian, because we get to talk about your favorite topic whenever the Gamescast is on. I'm sure many people in the chat know exactly what I'm talking about. I am, of course, talking about when I cast it on the screen. Could that be? Is it Pistol Whip on the screen? No way. Pistol Whip Encore has been teased. Yesterday, Cloudhead put out a tweet saying Pistol Whip Encore, February 24th, pointing towards a reveal on that date. No other details so far, but presumably, if you look at the game's track record, we could be talking about some form of new track, new style, maybe a collection of those, maybe some new modifiers. Ian, as someone that has been following Pistol Whip intensely for so long, what first of all, what do you think Encore could be?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, so some background here, I guess, is like, Pistol Whip came out in 2019. Amazing game, 10 songs at launch, and they've been building on that progressively every couple months since then, just adding more free songs initially, and then, changing the price eventually and trying to up the sort of size of the effort here to keep it going and keep this platform they've built growing. And late last year, I plan to sort of update my review of Pistol Whip to account for all those changes. And
Mm,
right at the end of the year, COVID invaded my home, and right during Christmas week when I was planning to do all those end of the year updates, and I just haven't recovered since then. And now we've got this new encore coming, and we're going to have to do that updated review as soon as we kind of assess what's in that content. Um, the thing that Pistol Whip has been missing, that the audience has been asking for since day one, is some kind of custom content, something to put your own mark on the game.
mm.
And I'm really curious to see if that gets realized in any way here or throughout the rest of the year in Pistol Whip.
So, do you think with that name, this could potentially be the last big update for Pistol Whip?
No, that seems really unlikely. The thing I think about Cloudhead is they have such depth of experience in the VR space. They are
Mm,
uh, really VR design experts at this point. And their first few games before this were these mist-like titles that just didn't grab you from the moment you went in, but still they are these experts. And uh, I've been up there and discussed. I've actually been to their studio. They live in. They're like in Western Canada, in probably like the most beautiful place on earth.
mm,
And went up there and talked to them. And like the thing about devs that have been in this space for a really long time is they've had a million great ideas, and no one paying them to go and make the idea.
mm.
So like that's been the story of Cloudhead Games all along, has been like, here's our first few ideas, and they're beautiful games, beautiful ideas, but they weren't like the Beat Saber pick up and just get into. And then Pistol Whip
Yeah.
obviously broke out of that mold and performed where the others really didn't. But the question is, are they able to spin up other projects, and where do those fit in relation to this one that kind of took off the way they kind of hoped maybe the first two did.
Yeah, because I think that hits the nail on the head. Because for me, I don't think this is probably the end of it either. I think they've got such a good thing going here, right? And they're going to keep this game alive as long as they possibly can. Because I mean, already it's been pretty unprecedented, even in terms of VR, that we've had 3 years of pretty consistent updates and content for the game. Like, they're keeping pace with probably Beat Saber in terms of the releases they do almost, and yet it's not like the traditional DLC structure that Beat Saber enjoys either. I think this is the kind of thing we always go back to, though. You talk about those gallery games not being that instant grabbable thing, like this ended up being much in the same style as Beat Saber was. I've always personally seen Pistol Whip as hopefully a stepping stone to getting as a full-fledged gallery episode 3, because that's, they broke so much ground. I remember doing the first episode, which was only about like 40 minutes long if you knew what you were doing, broke so much ground in terms of VR adventure gaming and trying to get right to the heart of all the different interactive mechanics we could change up in the medium. I remember the first time I tried the HTC Vive was at PAX in Seattle it's got to be 2015, and I picked up Joel Green from Cloudhead Games was there, I think, and I picked up a bottle in the loading zone, and I tried to smash it, and he was like, "Yeah, everyone tries to do that. We're working on that. You'll be able to do that at the end of the game." And then it was like there was so much focus on room scale at the time as well, so they came up with a system of, yes, you teleport around the world, but you're also always seeing a room scale area, so it's more like you're teleporting an entire area you can walk around in. And I remember dropping the bottle, and there it smashed. And I had the really weird sensation with my feet of being like, oh man, I don't want to step on broken glass. And they were onto so many cool things right the way through into episode 2, where they really started playing with that kind of labyrinth, Dark Crystal vibe, doing some real high fantasy stuff. I feel like, as cool as Pistol Whip is, I feel like a lot of Cloudhead's heart and soul is in those other projects as well. And I really do hope we get to see them move back into that field a bit and have a second project spun up. So I kind of hope Encore does signal that maybe we're going to see a little less of Pistol Whip going forward, and that maybe later this year they have something else to share on new content.
Yeah, so what we have seen, I didn't really cover this in that sort of summary of the evolution of Pistol Whip, but the last big update was the modifiers, where they kind of redid the entire modification system. I'm seeing in our comments Wolveraza mentioning that, let's see, love Pistol Whip, turn off their music, put on dual wield, turn off auto aim, play your own music, and forget the points, and it's just fun. And like you can play it that way. Pistol Whip gets criticized because, it's like, I don't know, it's the genre that's overcrowded, right? It's everyone is complaining about the glut of rhythm games, but I still come back to the sense that, like, in the real world, what's one of the most fun things you can do it's dancing, right? Physical movement and dancing is like one of like the core ways to express yourself in 3D space, and like obviously it would be the most popular genre in VR in retrospect. So yeah, I will be curious to see how it kind of like evolves into this forever title. And the modifiers was such a big step along that path. I will be curious to see how it develops over the next year or two.
Yeah, and we have seen people pull off the custom content angle on Quest now as well. So I do feel like, yeah, that is a big ask, and that is something that really would help finish off their pipeline for the game at some point, right? Even if it isn't now, that really does have to be. That would be a really good way of leaving it to transition onto other things, to then kind of hand so much of that like structure that they've spent years making, hand that over to the community and say, okay, now it's your guys' turn, and what Pistol Whip on our side is going to turn into more is, curation of those playlists that people make or those levels that people make. I think that would be a really good place to leave the game. It's just, I agree with you. It's probably they're probably not at the point where they're leaving it just yet, but I certainly am ready for that.
And honestly, the timing on this was a little wild, but Cloud had just announced right before we came in here to live to the studio that it's a free weekend.
Yeah, so that's a good way. Again, good way to get people. That's on Steam, right? Not on Quest. Yeah. So if you have a Steam account, or if you want to get your Quest linked up to PC, yeah, you can give it a try this weekend. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. I'm going to be very, very interested to see what the February 24th announcement means for the future of Pistol Whip, just as much as whatever content is coming. Let's move on to our second topic of the day, which is sticking with music, but in a different way. On Sunday, I think Sunday's when the Super Bowl is. I'm in the UK. If I get it wrong, I'm sorry. The Super Bowl was on. Meta obviously made a really big push. They had their giant advert with the kind of animatronic things getting split up, and the whole idea of standing in that space and not necessarily being massively fluent with the UI. So if I wanted to get rid of someone, I knew there was going to be like 30 seconds of messing around with a menu before they'd disappear from my world, and not knowing instantly how to mute everyone else or mute myself. It gave me a new perspective on a lot of the social stuff going on with VR, and also concerts in general, because that is something that I genuinely love doing and consider to be a very big hobby of mine, going to live music. And being in there with virtual people that are talking loudly over the concert, and not in that kind of old man shh way, but they're literally just talking with their friends. But because of the whole proximity thing, at a concert, the music's going to be drowning them out anyway, and they're going to have to be leaning into each other's ears to speak, right? Here, whatever they say just went straight over the top of the music. And it's just so far from something I consider to be a very compelling experience. And I guess I wonder, what's it going to take for something like a concert to be a genuinely immersive and an actual event, right? Where I will think, oh my God, Foo Fighters are playing in VR in 2 days. I have to get a ticket and I have to be there when it starts. Like, what level do we need to get to for that to be a worthwhile experience?
Well, you've been to some of the Fortnite events, right? Like you've done some of those in the 2D flat screen, and are they better than this, and why?
I would say they are the exact same experience, apart from obviously there's just so much less. There's less friction getting into it because you're not getting into VR. You're not having to learn whole new systems. You don't have to like link up to Facebook and stuff like that. You're just kind of straight into the game, provided you have all the stuff in place. And they're sillier because it's just a bunch of people standing around doing silly dances, again, while a 2D screen is on. And I still wouldn't say that was a compelling experience either. I think both of them are very much foundational experiences right now. I think, Tim Sweeney and co love putting those things on in Fortnite with the intention of carrying it further each and every time. And because we talk about the idea of, Fortnite potentially being an early sign of the start of the metaverse as well, right? With all its interconnectivity and the idea that it's grown beyond just that one game.
Yeah, and they've got Epic has the metahumans, right? They have that whole brand where you can sort of imagine what happens when they start sticking those into maybe Fortnite, and you've got representations that maybe look closer to the real physical you. It's funny, I'm seeing people commenting like, oh, I forgot that existed, or maybe they forgot that existed. And like, just going back on it, it is silly the way Facebook and Meta used like almost every single word you could come up with to refer to like being together with someone. They went through spaces, rooms, venues, and then they finally arrived at like, let's just call it Horizon. It's over there. What we want to do is over there. And it's just, I don't know, like, yeah, I get this there's this slider in venues to go from listening to the concert to listening to just voice chat. And so like you've got this, you can extend your finger and ride it on the slider from one end to the other. And it's like this whole slider is stupid. This everything is bad. I just didn't like, I want to hear just the concert over here.
Only going to appeal to a certain crowd, especially in this day and age where the UI isn't going to be all the way there. And
I think we're done. I think the show might be down. Are we back, guys?
Did we disappear?
Let's see.
See? Oh, you're right. Hang on. Why did that happen? Your stream is temporarily blocked because we detected... Oh, no! They detected the Foo Fighters and brought us down. I didn't know that could happen.
Visually?
Whoops.
They detected the visual Foo Fighters?
It says we detected copyright audio and video. I just thought a music video for the Foo Fighters wouldn't be a big deal. It didn't even...
There's no audio.
Yeah. All right, let me get on... That's so annoying.
Whoa.
Dave Grohl is not my friend. Is there anything we can do about that, Z? It says temporarily blocked. So let me switch up the video, because then maybe that will get rid of it. If I put Pistol Whip back on, because that was a 10-minute video. Let me Google on here what happens when you get stream temporarily unavailable.
Dave Grohl is copyrighted. He's just like his visage.
Yeah. Streams. Because it doesn't even have a like a what next thing.
Oh, we're back.
I was just phasing away. I think we're back, Ian.
What was
Dave
that?
Grohl, it's over, mate. Not friends with you anymore.
Yeah, it's
wow.
like what, there was no audio. What? There's the face. The person's face was copywritten.
Apparently a video of Dave Grohl's face is a copyrighted thing. I don't know. Maybe it thought we were using the audio, even though we're not. That'll be one for Heaney to look into later.
Yeah. All right. This is all right. Now I'm angry with the whole, like.
Yeah, already didn't like it enough.
We'll go on to the Monday show and talk about how this is going to work on the whole meta situation here. Let's put this image up here. This is from Wikipedia. Heaney. I'm too close. I'm all flustered now. Yeah, we're gonna get into this with Heaney. This is the original Walkman from 1979, and it's got 2 headphone ports up top, and nothing, in my opinion, nothing has, like, in 30 or 40 years of technology development, nothing beats the social experience of putting in an earbud, having your friend wear an earbud, and both and you just banging your heads to the music together. Like that's it. And venues is so far from that. Like there's so much to get through to even see that social experience with somebody else. But like, I want to go back to this, right? Like the social VR music experiences need to do this. And like, here's this, the content is coming from one piece of legally purchased material, and it's being ported over to 2 people. And here we are so many years later, and like we can't even show the visuals of an audio thing without getting a copyright strike down notice. So weird.
Yeah. And I guess that makes me think, like, actually, if you need to go back to the drawing board with VR music, right? And accept that right now we are so far away from being able to do a compelling concert. Like you could even take like what are the Microsoft mixed reality stages, photogrammetry, and you could do a 3D asset of a band performing a set, but you're still going to have that kind of mushy texturedless faces. You know, Dave Grohl would look more like paper mache. Although if you did that, maybe it'd be harder to get copyrighted. And that I feel like, okay, so maybe you can walk a step back. And I was looking at this thinking, oh, what about like the idea of like listening parties? And you try and take the live element out of it, and like someone's releasing a new record, and you say, okay, well, in Horizon Venues, there's no screen or anything, but you could go in for like silent listening parties, and maybe at this and like in this time and this time and this time, one of the artists is in there, and you can do a Q&A session or something like that. That's why are we like trying to sprint all the way to the horizon with the end game of, you know, sports and concerts and all the cool stuff when we really can't run yet, you know, is I think is where I get with it.
The thing that so I come from this very particular generation of computing, and I remember I got a what did they call it? Super drive, I think was the term for the DVD burners that Mac put out, and I got like the ability to burn DVDs, and then using iMovie and then iDVD to start with a project, get a song from my iTunes library, put it in, get it from a CD, then to put it on the audio track, and then to burn a DVD and put it in my own personal DVD player and show my family of 5 people this creation, all of our family photos or videos set to a song we all love or something that means something to us. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing that was like formative for me in my early days of learning to play with computers. And like it's a brick wall to try to upload that stuff to YouTube and share privately with a group of 5 different friends, whereas you could maybe repeat that same process today privately over a text message thread, but you can't do the same thing on the open web. And I just, it's one of those things that I felt like was an easy win for Meta to try to pursue, and Google for that matter, to give creators a lot of leeway in how they use a very large library of music. And that's fundamentally where we are here. There's a giant roadblock in like just enabling millions or billions of people to pay very small amounts to use music in a wider range of ways than we can today. And I do think we're going to see a lot of change in this coming year in how this stuff functions.
Yeah, and I think that's at the end of the day, the Foo Fighters thing will be a big learning experience for them, and everything else that's going on with Horizon. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can bring up that next generation that you're talking about and the gap between this and Worlds sooner rather than later. Because certainly, based on my experiences right now, I feel like long way to go there. I'm going to remind everyone that this podcast is sponsored by Les Mills Body Combat, which brings the body combat experience to your VR headset with an extensive workout portfolio, top quality coaching, innovative mechanics, and different intensities. You can get it on the Oculus Store today in the link below in the description. We have one more thing to talk about, and that is a relatively distressing topic even. Do you think I'm allowed to put a trailer for Star Trek up? Do you think we'll get in trouble? Let's risk it.
Yeah, here's my live long and prosper. I'm glad that's not trademarked.
Star Trek Bridge Crew, third video thing starting in the middle of space today, and me thinking, wait, no, that's still Vox Machinae. It has been delisted across. Well, I've checked now, and it's gone across Steam, it's gone across Oculus, and it's gone across the PlayStation Store. So this is maybe the 3rd or 4th VR game that unfortunately has just wound down and disappeared after high-profile ones like Marvel Powers United was a big one that went. And I think obviously the common thread between those two is it's very likely that whatever creative license you had to use the Star Trek brand has expired for Ubisoft, and as a result, you can no longer sell the game. I think this is a real bitter pill for me to swallow. I think there are 2 Ubisoft games, and actually the other one I think has been taken down as well, which was Werewolves Within, both social VR games that really played on the idea of body language in VR and trying to use the technology in different ways to communicate a different kind of social experience. Bridge Crew was such an incredible idea of four players coming together, each taking on a different role on a starship, and doing those things you've watched time and again in the TV show. It's such an amazing idea, like that, so good that I couldn't believe we saw it so early on in VR's life cycle, and obviously ended up coming to Quest a couple of years after it first released. So there was clearly still some life in it somewhere. I think this is a real big loss for just people's VR content libraries in general. And there's been a lot of talk recently about the idea of preservation. Nintendo is shutting down the stores for the 3DS and the Wii U next year. And it's a real big shame to see that VR is not, I guess inevitably, but VR is not immune to those issues, and that we're going to be losing more and more titles in the years to come, I'm sure. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on what could be done about that, or what people could do to try and stop it happening.
Well, that's a good question. So I did reach out to Meta on this issue in particular, just to see if they had a comment on refunding, and they just said their normal refund policy applies, and people that already have the game, it should continue to function. But the question that we obviously had was, how does the multiplayer, how do the servers work, and how does that go forward? Because at some point they'll just probably turn the servers off, and then the main part of the game, that the big draw is dead if that goes away. And there was such excitement. I remember I was so happy when this launched on Quest, because it felt like this game that really deserved a second chance finally got it on the platform that should have had a lot of people. And the fact is, as a lifelong Trekkie myself, I went into this once on
Mm,
Quest,
mm,
and I feel terrible admitting that to you all. But like, those are the I've as much as I feel bad about that, I also am learning to stop apologizing for the fact that uh, my it's just not worth the headache over and over and over again. I'm too tired of waiting there for 45 minutes for my three friends to get
mm,
into VR with me. And that
mm,
is the social VR experience.
mm. Yeah, and maybe it's one of those things where I feel like we're all quite guilty of this in VR, but we're all like, this has to be in VR, this has to be in VR, this has to be in VR, and then once it finally ends up happening, you don't see the return on investment that the prior demand might have signaled you were going to get. I think you saw that a lot with the Codemasters Dirt games, like the second Dirt game got VR support by popular demand after release, and then just didn't really go anywhere. Very recently, Hitman 3 came to PC VR, and granted, that's kind of IO Interactive's fault because it's not a very good port at all, but everyone was talking about how that was a potential game of the year contender, and then it just didn't go anywhere because of the quality of that port. It's an interesting thing to consider in the realm of VR, because we're not just talking about losing games, but potentially we could be talking, what if, at the end of the road, Meta doesn't like where it went with Horizons. They already didn't like where they went with Spaces, which was a thing that people put plenty of hours into. Not obviously not a lot of people, otherwise it would still be with us. But you're potentially putting a lot of trust in and your identity, I suppose, into services that could end up not existing one day. And that's a pretty scary thought when you think about, like, the metaverse, and maybe one day that room that you always used to like in the metaverse is now closed and you can't open the door or something, right?
Well, one of the things I brought up was I would like to see this in Rec Room, and Heaney had an example of a game that was on Steam that was very similar mechanics, and this does seem like the kind of title that all the mechanics in this game feel like they could be transferable to Rec Room or
Mm,
Horizon or VR Chat even in a pretty
mm,
effective way.
mm.
Um, and I would like to see a game like this, you know, come up with a non-trademarked version of this
Yeah,
if you really
exactly.
want to slide it by the censors. The censors isn't the right word because that's government interference. The content moderators, right?
Yeah.
And the AI watchdogs. That's what you got to get past when you put this content on those other platforms. And again, yeah, it goes back to the thing we were talking about before, where it's just Meta and Facebook are playing at a certain level and they're moving at a certain speed that like game developers and platforms that are like brought in by partnerships. Like, imagine you enter into a deal with Facebook in, let's say, 2019 to build a game for the Quest platform. And part of your agreements are like, we still get to use our own login system, right? And then the next year, Facebook's like, nope, you got to use Facebook.
Mm,
What does that do to the previous people who had like some mechanic that really relied on their own system to be allowed in? And like, you know, I think about this even internally at Meta. Like, how frustrating would it be if you ended up on a team at Meta that just got the rug pulled out from under you, and someone higher up said, you know, that's not a good direction. You guys are no longer in the building new stuff phase. You're in the
mm,
maintain and just make sure it doesn't break phase. And we're going to wind that down and focus on this other idea. Like, I think that's the way Meta and Facebook operates across the board. And it leaves a lot of people behind. And I think this is one of those. And
mm,
John Carmack, going back to your original question, John Carmack, the original Doom creator, one of them, as well as one of the people who is just instrumental in making mobile VR happen, has been a proponent of preserving some of this content from this period, and has been a big proponent of all that original like Oculus Go and Gear VR work somehow being m- playable sometime down the future. And
mm,
over on Go, they've released an unlocked version of the operating system, so there is some like if you went and got an Oculus Go 20 years from now straight out of a box, you could still get it up and running and use it in certain ways. Um, those people of that magnitude, and so many people know. Think about this technology on the span of hundreds of years, and I like Star Trek as the example because Star Trek is the future I've always had in my head as the one I want to live in, like, or I want to see our descendants living in, like this society where everyone has a place, and um where everyone's contributing to this idea of bettering oneself and exploration. But like, that's Carmack has been a proponent of like uh, preserving these things so that they exist in the history books, and people hundreds of years from now can go back and see what VR from the birth of the industry was like. And it really is a fundamental question about how is this going to work. This is a little piece of history that uh, I don't know if you can properly bring up in a 2400 era holodeck.
yeah. I see people saying, "Oh, well, Star Trek isn't Facebook's fault." No, totally. Like, this is obviously the publisher and the licensee thing. It's not a Meta deciding to sunset anything thing, because obviously it goes across other platforms as well. It's just very interesting to talk about what that means when you then apply that concept to all the work that Meta has done. And you're right, I hadn't even thought about, like, there's in some senses there's a weird thing about this year being the year of the death of the original Quest as well, right? Because so much content now, we don't even make a point of it really in our reporting anymore, because it's almost kind of a given at this point that games that look slightly ambitious on standalone VR are going to be Quest 2 only. Um, And it's just an interesting cautionary tale in my mind, and I wish we could all work faster to get to whatever it is we need to get to, so that people are able to keep this sort of thing alive in their own way. You know, maybe like you take the Star Trek bridge crew room, and that's a permanent installation in some sort of virtual arena that you own or something like that, right?
So, we've heard? Do you think Meta is going to acquire Ubisoft?
What was that? Sorry.
Do you think Meta is going to acquire Ubisoft?
Sorry, you got real crackly, and it's hard to
put it in our comments if he can't hear me, he can read you. But I'm curious if Meta is going to acquire Ubisoft.
Oh, acquire
how that relates
by
to this
Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Do I think it's going to happen?
Yeah.
So there actually was a news story today of a Ubi exec saying we actually have many high-level assets, so maybe there's potential room for that. I do think. I don't know. I don't think they will, because I think if you look at their strategy now, there's been almost a kind of grassroots approach to getting talent and content that is in VR first. And if you were to buy Ubisoft now, you would have such Ubisoft is incalculably big. Like, one Assassin's Creed game has like thousands of people working on it across the globe in different teams. You know, they have studios you don't even know about, like in Singapore and India and places like that, just working on rocks or wallpaper textures or something in the game. And it's these are these giant industrial things. And I think if you were to do that now, I can't quite think of the scale of onboarding to take all of these developers and say, now you're working on VR. That is a Herculean effort, as opposed to just splintering out and identifying those teams that you're hoping will one day be like, one day I'm sure they want the Onward guys, Downpour, to be the size of an Infinity Ward or someone that makes a Call of Duty, right? I think they see that as the better approach right now. And then they already have their existing relationships for Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell, which I think they think is a better approach of carrying forward right now, I think.
Someone else asked on Twitter, I think was about Rec Room recently, and whether Meta should have acquired Rec Room, given all the issues we've talked about throughout the rest of this episode, right? Where Venues was not a great experience overall, and it got crushed. And there is that question of who Meta can acquire at this point and not sort of instantly get regulators in multiple countries to say no.
It's really, really interesting. I saw Gamer Tag. Good to see you, pal. Hope you enjoyed your vacation in New York. I saw him say there's zero chance Meta will buy Ubisoft. You would have said 2 weeks ago there was zero chance that Microsoft would buy Activision, would spend $70 billion on Activision. So I think we're kind of out of the field of saying zero chance anything will happen now. I see where you're coming from with the idea of an Ubisoft acquisition, because they do have such like a good precedent, and if you're going to make a serious move that's going to really get people talking about the direction VR is heading again anytime soon, it would be something of that size. So we'll see, but I think we'll have more big acquisitions this year, but I don't think it'll be something on the scale of Ubisoft. I don't think that would be the right direction. I think you should go and buy more studios to the point where you are the size of, Sony's stable of studios, rather than buying this big unwieldy machine that's already up and running. And I think that brings us to the end of discussion for this week on the VR Gamescast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sticking with us during the Dave Grohl outage of 2022. Who knew?
Live long and prosper, DRM, and
yeah, and that. Ian, thanks for being here. It's been a joy to speak with you once more. Next week, I'd imagine me and Harry are back. We'll be talking about whatever got revealed for Pistol Whip, and hopefully we'll have some more content to review. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good week, everyone. Have a good weekend.